This is right in my wheelhouse. I am exactly the right age for us to have a hot hatch conversation.
The hot hatchback is a motoring child of the 80s. Fast, nimble and noisy.
Welcome to the world of the boy racer.
I think if you don't like driving a hot hatch, then you just don't like driving.
Hot hatch to the petrol head is like air to lungs. We need it.
These hot hatchbacks became the first loves of many a boy and girl racer.
For me, it's the first high-performance car that a kid, certainly this kid, had a dream of owning.
For most people, a hatchback would have been their first car. And if they were really lucky, then a hot hatch might have been their first car.
So what is a hot hatch? Well, it's a standard hatchback with X factor, racy, attention-grabbing looks, athletic agility and potent power under the bonnet. But our panel will be looking for more than just power. They'll be looking for lowered, lightweight and easily customisable.
There's always been this small category of car that's had an element of performance attached to it. I mean, the Mini, look at that, the Mini Cooper, perfect example of that. And there's the Fiat 500 Abarth, you know, tiny little car, but you start to add a bit of performance to it, whether it's from the engine or from the suspension setup, it becomes a hot hatch, doesn't it?
Our panel have each voted for their favourites, creating a short list of what they believe make the world's top 5 hot hatches. But can they agree which is best?
This is the car that defines, literally defines the entire genre of hot hatch.
That's what I remember lusting after when I was a kid. That was the kind of holy grail when I was 16.
Can you begin this list with any other car?
Yep, Paul's right. The only way to start this short list off is with the car they call the first ever hot hatch. The Golf GTI.
Shall we just start recording now, because we've achieved greatness, haven't we? We've completed the show. Thanks for tuning in.
When you sit in a Golf GTI, there's something really organic about it. I mean, everything's perfectly proportioned. The seat's exactly right, the steering wheel's exactly right, the gear stick's exactly right, the pedals are in the right position.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I'm talking about.
And then when you combine that with the fact it's got this epic handling, epic power, epic delivery, epic design, it's kind of like, I mean, they just hit it out of the park.
Every single time I got into a Golf GTI, they just put a huge, great big smile on my face. Car manufacturers today are still trying to emulate the feeling that this car gives. This is the daddy. This is the one that started that whole hot hatch craze.
Yeah.
So once you open the door, hopefully the first thing you're going to look at is the tartan trim. And the next thing you're going to look at is the golf ball, which sits on top of the stick. And just right there, what a wonderful bit of fun.
Everyone is going through changes.
So I remember watching a TV advert about the Mark II Golf GTI, and it was directed by David Bailey, who was a famous stills photographer. And it had the model Paula Hamilton in it. She was leaving her husband and she was throwing off all the jewellery that she'd had and her fur coat, and she took off her wedding ring. But the one thing that she wanted to salvage from this relationship was the car. And as soon as I saw that advert, I remember knowing that one day I would own that car.
The world goes on the same.
Since 1974, over 35 million Golfs have been sold, one every 41 seconds. And the GTI proudly heads up the fleet. But why it really earns its place on our list is it's the pioneering hot hatch, the first. In the early 70s, Volkswagen was reliant on the original people's car, their classic Beetle. But sales were falling. It was seen as old-fashioned, a car of the past. Coming up with a new hatchback had proven tough. So VW bought in Italian heavyweight car designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, who designed spectacular cars for Maserati, Ferrari and even Aston Martin. Now he was under pressure to develop a cash cow for struggling VW. And boy, did he do it. The design he came up with in 1974 broke the mould, somehow both a sign of the times and of the future.
I don't think it's an overstatement to say that the Mark I Golf pretty much saved Volkswagen. It was revolutionary, it took them into a different market, brought them a whole new set of buyers, and more importantly, it gave them the money they needed at the time to keep them afloat.
In its first full year of production, over 30,000 were sold. It was an instant success. Giugiaro later claimed it was his most important design ever. It was bold, it was beautiful, but it wasn't a hot hatch because VW hadn't invented it yet. In fact, the management of VW didn't want a sportier version of their Golf. It had never been done with a hatchback before, and they thought it was too risky.
What you need to remember is the Golf GTI nearly didn't happen.
At the VW factory, a team of engineers felt so passionately about creating a sportier version, they went against the management and secretly, after hours, worked on adapting the engine and designed details to make the Golf go faster and handle better at speed.
It was the passionate crew that secretly took a Golf off the production line, hid it away, and it was those guys that turned it into the GTI, went back to VW. Bear in mind, it's in their own time. We're talking evenings and weekends here. They then go back to VW and go, hey, guys, I think we've really hit on something here.
This is naughty employees doing something they shouldn't. This is taking a car, raising the suspension, the gearbox, the engine, all this stuff without management permission, because they knew there was a great idea there. They knew they could create a car that would elevate this wonderful little hatchback into something iconic, but all without permission.
And it's because of that top secret project, because those guys invested their own time, the world was given the Golf GTI, and that then meant that the world was then given a whole host of hot hatches. So whoever those guys were, they're heroes.
So while the standard Golf was a family favourite, the pumped-up GTI enticed drivers with a passion for performance.
I love the fact that its ability to take you round a corner was matched by the power to get you out of it.
I mean, a 1.6-litre engine may not sound a lot by today's standards, but back then, that was pretty big. And over 100 horsepower, too. Those are big numbers for the day.
Within 5 minutes of getting in this car, you feel like you're a professional racing driver. Yeah. It makes you feel good. Yeah, it went like stinking. Yes, it was reliable rafting. But what it did is it made you look clever. It made you look good. You got in a Golf GTI, you look fabulous.
Hey, I'm back, Reg. You love the purity of the design, don't you? Yeah. To me, it's the purity of the driving experience.
To get their beloved GTI in production, the plucky engineers had to make a brave promise to their bosses. If they didn't guarantee sales, they faced the sack.
The guys on the shop floor were told you had to make 5,000 units to break even. So they pushed the button, it was a brave move, and ended up selling 460,000 units of the car, which you've got to admit, a bit of a two fingers of the management, isn't it, really?
You feel that the Volkswagen Golf has been designed by passionate enthusiasts and not by a computer. It's not been churned out by an accountant, that car. It's been put together by guys that really cared about making what they had better.
It's an incredible success story, isn't it? That started from a relatively simple, small, little hatchback. And now we've got an entire world of hot hatches.
In our forensic search for the world's greatest hot hatch, we've already put the VW Golf GTI under the microscope. But the next car has a formidable feature.
But there is just something about that car that every time I see one, I melt.
If you've got that word turbo on the back of your car, then you're off. It's a game changer.
Hot on the heels of the VW Golf, our next car is the uber chic Renault 5 GT Turbo.
For me, the Renault 5 is pretty much as close to perfect as a hot hatch can be. I think even in this company, it is the best looking car here.
I love them. It's bonkers love that I've got for it.
Renault had witnessed the Golf GTI's success and decided to create their own hot hatch to add to the hysteria. First, they went straight from rally car to road with a two-seater mid-engine rear-wheel drive special, the 1980 Renault 5 Turbo.
The thing that's cool about this car, and you have to remember, it's back in the 1980s, and there were certain words flying around, and one of those words happened to be turbo.
You've got to think, in a pub, you're laying your car keys down. What have you got? Golf GTI, pretty cool. What have you got? Renault 5 Turbo. It's the end of the conversation, isn't it, really?
Renault were the standout innovators of the turbo. It had been a core part of their Formula One programme.
Building the world's first Formula One turbo is an achievement that goes beyond the racing context.
In 1979, they were the first manufacturer ever to win a Grand Prix in a turbocharged car. But putting this F1 tech into a hatchback would be sheer madness, unless you're Renault, of course. The product was dubbed by them the Little Bomb, and in the hands of a professional driver, Geno Ragnotti, it won the famed Monte Carlo Rally, amongst many others.
A turbo engine in the Renault 5 puts this very popular model on the upper echelons of the big international rallies. When it comes on the market, it will be the fastest of the small European series cars.
But in 1985, a legend was born that meant this little bomb could be bought for the high street. The engine was moved to the front. The power now went through the front wheels. It got back seats and a slightly new name. The GT Turbo. Yep, it still had the turbo.
You're talking about a car that could do 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds. It can do 120 mile an hour, and it's affordable by the average guy. You might as well just strap yourself into the Starship Enterprise and engage warp drive. These are monster numbers today, and back then, just something else.
So I love a turbo gauge in the car, and in the Renault 5 Turbo, you can almost like not take your eyes away from it. Put your foot on the throttle, turbo goes up.
It just makes you feel like you're a better driver and better than everybody else. But yeah, watching the gauge flick up and down, wicked. Love it.
Sticking a turbo onto that car just gave you that extra boost. You get halfway through the rev range and all of a sudden you get this kick up the backside where the car just takes on a whole new level of performance.
But the turbo wasn't without its quirks.
So the Renault 5 displayed this characteristic called turbo lag, and what turbo lag is you putting your foot down on the accelerator and the slight delay between that and the turbo actually providing the extra oomph to get you down the road. The problem is this always seemed to happen in mid-corner. As you're rolling on the accelerator, the thing would just kick in and fire you off the road, and that's why there's not many left.
You know when you're taking your dog for a walk and it sees a squirrel and it goes like that, and it shoots you down the driveway, that's what it is. It's like, calm, calm, calm.
I had it on a jumper, actually. I remember my mum got me a white jumper with just the words turbo written on it. It was a cool word to have written, stitched into a jumper, but I wore that thing everywhere.
So what actually is turbo?
So a turbo uses exhaust gases to turn a compressor. That compressor forces air into the cylinder in an engine. If you've got more air in there, you can put more fuel in there. That's going to give you a bigger bang, which is going to make that thing go like the proverbial off a shovel.
But it's not just the turbo that accelerated the Renault onto the list. It's also its place at the heart of the car mod scene, where it has a fanatical following.
I'm from the max power generation, and I will tell you firsthand that the Renault 5 GT Turbo was massive.
They've got a huge cult following and they've maintained it. They've always had a great presence, and they still do to this day because you see them at car shows.
I mean, there were whole movements of people who would get together with their modified cars and go to cruises and just do really antisocial things. Just to hang out and be amongst that crowd was an exciting time. I can still smell the tyre smoke in the air.
The people that were sticking all that stuff on their car, they thought this was improving things, where actually they were making everything around them very ugly. The cars became from these wonderful, chic, fabulous little things that you could drive to St. Moritz, or you could park outside your country house, to an embarrassment, frankly.
When you put a spoiler on a car, it doesn't make it go any faster. Adding stickers to a car doesn't make it have more horsepower. It's just not true.
I even put a "I'm on a mission" sticker in the back of my granny's Mark I Ford Fiesta because it made me go faster.
Either modified or not, the GT Turbo was a huge success for Renault, and it made the shortlist for the world's greatest hot hatch. But there's a second Renault in the running for the shortlist too. It's bold, it's blue, but will it be 2 out of 2?
The Renault Clio was a car that your gran would go shopping in, but then they released the Clio Williams, and that changed the game. It had a massive lump under the bonnet, gold wheels, handling to die for, but then Renault did something that upset all their customers.
So Renault, they teamed up with Formula One team Williams that was winning world championships like back-to-back back then. And they said, what we're going to do is have this one special edition. Every car's got a number on it, number 1, number 2, and we're only going to print like 2,500 of these cars. And guess what? They get sold immediately. So then all the board at Renault look at each other and go, that was good, wasn't it? It was a big success. Let's just do it again. So they then created the Williams Clio 2. And then said, well, let's make more, like 5,000 or whatever it was. And guess what? They sold all them ones as well. But now, if you're a Williams Clio 1 owner, you're like, hold on, I thought I was a special one. But now you've just gone and done it again. Talk about being cheeky. And perhaps for that reason, that's why the Clio isn't that iconic and it doesn't make our list.